Good morning and welcome. Thank you for tuning in to Bat Talk with Sharona. We're back. I'm your host. My name is Sharona. We are back from hiatus. I won't promise that we're going to do a weekly show, although we're going to try. I want to give a shout out to my guest today, Robyn Mundy, who kind of nudged me to do this podcast. And as always, I'm thankful to her, thankful to have her in my life. But we are back. We're going to talk about the Buffalo Bills. They're very interesting off-season with the recent firing of Doug Whaley and the trashing of their entire scouting department. Interesting times in the scouting world. We're going to talk about that. We'll take a spin around the division, around the AFC East, and talk about what teams did in the division, get her thoughts on that. And then we're going to finish up with a discussion on the current state of the media, ESPN laying off approximately 100 people. Interesting names there, some long-standing fixtures in sports media got the axe. It's interesting that ESPN, quote, air quotes, I'm doing air quotes, laid off so many people who still had time remaining on their contracts. I find that fascinating. We'll get Robyn's thoughts on that, and we'll just have a little round table between the two of us about what's going on in the media and what it's like to be a woman in the media, and just some observations about that. So I'm excited to have Robyn on. If you are just now joining us, if you're new to the podcast, you can follow the podcast now at Podbean. One of the reasons, I suppose, one of the excuses for why it took so long to come back from hiatus is technology is changing so much. And, I knew I needed to join Podbean and get on Stitcher, some of the newer interfaces that people now use with their podcasts. And, we're so technologically friendly here that I just, it's like, I've got to do all of this and to do these things. But I do enjoy it, and I do appreciate everyone who has touched base with me during the time that we were off and expressed their wishes that we come back. And so we are back. I'm going to try to be a lot better, to be more to do more of a regular schedule. Once a week seems to be where we're probably going to end up, and we're going to try and keep things a little bit shorter, 45 minutes to an hour. That's the most that we're going to try to do here. We'll go an hour today with Robyn, and hopefully we'll be able to fit everything in. Robyn and I do like to talk, and so hopefully we can fit everything in an hour. But, that's kind of where we are, and you can follow, by the way, you can find out what's going on with me. You can follow me on Twitter at Sports by Sharona. You can follow pretty much all of my happenings on the website, Back Talk with Sharona. And check that out. I participated in an draft for Inside the Pylon. You can see the selections that I made for the Tennessee Titans and the Carolina Panthers. See how my wish list for those teams stacked up against what they did. So we'll take another quick break. When we come back, Robyn Mundy is going to join me. Robyn is our Bills correspondent. If you want to know what's going on with the Buffalo Bills and get some quality thoughts about them, Robyn is your source. So stay tuned in. You are listening to Back Talk with Sharona.
And look at it go! He could go all the way! Touchdown! Touchdown! Touchdown!
The Bills make me wanna shout. Kick your heels up and shout. Throw your hands up and shout. Throw your head back and shout. Come on now, the Bills are making it happen now. Stand up now, come on.
The Bills have a great shout song, Robyn. Thanks for joining me.
Oh, well, thank you for inviting me, and thanks for letting me launch you back into business.
Well, I needed a nudge. My buddy Zach Law, who I do a Wednesday night show with, by the way, you can catch us on Going for Two later this evening starting at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Now, that's a web show, and so you have to put up with my ugly mug on it. on this podcast, all you have to do is listen to my whiny voice. But so he's been pushing me, and some other people have been pushing me. But having you on, that's that's all of the encouragement, and that's the carrot that I needed. So what's up with your bills? Fill us in. Give us all the skinny on how things went down, and then we'll talk about how you feel about it.
Well, adding to the bills, and anybody that lives in Western New York knows this, but if there are other folks out there that may or may not be aware, the Pegulas who own the Buffalo Bills also own the National Hockey League Buffalo Sabres. And in addition to firing Doug Whaley, they fired their general manager and coach for the Sabres as well. So I'm leading with that because things are very busy at Pegula Sports and Entertainment these days, very busy. So with that being said, the news came out, and it was kind of interesting that there were a lot of people that kind of buckled up when the announcement came out that Doug Whaley was fired, which was like at 6:30 in the morning on Sunday. Yeah. And there were some people that were kind of, surprised at the timing, and that they wondered why he wasn't fired earlier. Well, the reason for that is because if you fire somebody, they take all that information with them and can share it with other clubs. A la Scott, is it McLaughlin? Is that how you say his last name, from the Redskins? He was fired by Washington in January, I believe, and he walked away with a lot of data. And the scouting department, as you mentioned earlier, that we're going to talk about, that was relieved of their duties. You don't release people before a draft. You release them afterwards. And so that's why they chose the time that they did. Did it make it awkward? Because I'm sure they all knew ahead of time it was coming. It probably was a very awkward draft room, I would bet, this year.
Yeah, I bet it was awkward. And, it's interesting, and I'm glad that you brought that up, because it was something that I had intended to touch upon. It is weird. There's never really any good time to fire somebody, right? I mean, it's always going to be an awkward situation. It's never an ideal situation when you lose faith in someone and you want to shove them out the door. And I've gone back and forth on how I feel about the timing of these things, because, obviously, if you've got a guy, whether it's your head scout or your general manager or whatever, that you don't trust in your process, you should move on. I mean, that if that trust relationship is gone. But on the other hand, why would you keep someone around to participate in that process if you don't trust them? And if then, so I don't know. I mean, I don't think there is an ideal situation here, and I do wonder, how awkward it was and how things went on with all of that. But I woke up Sunday to the news had already leaked out and all of that, and I like, on a personal level, I like Doug Whaley. And you wrote a fascinating article, by the way, that I want to ask you about, and some other people in the Bills media had talked about this too, and it's how uncomfortable Doug Whaley was, speaking with the media and speaking before a crowd. And I just wonder, it made me wonder how his communication skills were in general, with other people, and what, what impact that had to do with his job performance.
Well, yeah, and the problem is that I think there was a commingling of the issues in terms of his direct communication skills. Public speaking has never been his strength,
Mhm.
And you could see that from the very first press conference he ever had when he was named general manager and onward. I think he looked ill at ease, and sometimes downright uncomfortable. I think that he was a person who had difficulty responding to a barrage of adversarial questions. And sometimes people go into, the best way I can describe it is kind of a mental paralysis when someone confronts them, okay? When somebody is asking them a heated question and they're put on the spot and they don't know how to respond for whatever reason, okay? You can postulate a million reasons why he didn't know what was going on. And couldn't answer questions in his press conference in January that everybody keeps talking about. The bottom line is he was extremely ill-prepared. And for that, I'm going to be straight up and tell you that falls on the people who are responsible for making sure that people are ready to speak to the media. And that would probably fall on the Vice President of Communications, and oddly enough, the Vice President of Communications was replaced after Sean McDermott was named head coach. And then magically, this is what happened. And so moving forward, they brought in a PR person, I believe, from the Philadelphia Eagles, Derek Boyko, to take over for the Vice President of Communications, and things have changed, in that regard. The way things are done with respect to the media, et cetera, you can see that there's, this is evolving. But my point is that Doug Whaley, he, for all of the ineptitude that people want to talk about with respect to the draft, okay, I'm right there with you. However, where I felt like it kind of crossed the line was when I would see, hear, read people making fun of him. And I kind of related to it, I think, on a personal level, because I'm a highly introverted person. And I think, because I've never met him, but I think from everything I've seen of Doug Whaley, I think he's fairly introverted as well. And I can understand, why he responded the way that he did. Yeah. And I guess I have an issue with why go after the man, because his communication skills need some work. Go after him for the substantive stuff, but the other stuff, leave it alone.
I can relate to. It's weird because I go through spells where I'm extremely introverted, but I'm also extroverted at times. I don't know, you're the expert here, so maybe you can diagnose me or whatever, but and I think back, and this is something that I've thought about a lot, because I think back, was extremely introverted as a child, and book reader, was very, because I was a late in life child and was so much younger than my siblings, I was mostly around adults, and so it was, going to school and becoming more social was an interesting experience for me, because, I did spend most of my time, with either with books or with adults. And I think that's kind of been a theme that I've seen, throughout my life. But, maybe that is a thing that you can be at times, one way or the other. But I think that my natural state of being, if that makes any sense at all, is more of an introvert. And it's kind of shown itself more lately. Guys, I apologize. My allergies are on con like 3 right now. Robyn got to hear me sneeze about 50 times before we started the show. So I'm a little drippy and icky this morning. I apologize in advance. My throat's a little hoarse. But, I think that being an introvert is kind of my more natural state of being, if that makes any sense. And I've exhibited that here lately with my social media habits. And we're going to talk about this more in our media segment when we get toward the end. And I'm more of a lurker and really kind of watching and studying, so to speak. But yeah, it is interesting with Doug Whaley, and I do think that those things were certainly an issue. But what is inescapable is that the drafts have not been very good, and the decision making has raised some questions. And it's been fascinating to watch the Bills handle the Sammy Watkins situation. And now, they're not going to pick up his option year. That, to me, is just simply incredible when you consider how much they gave up to go out and get him in the draft.
That's right. Can I back up the train just a bit?
Sure.
I have a response for you about not really understanding whether you're an introvert or an extrovert.
Oh, great.
Yeah, for those of you folks that are interested in this kind of stuff, there's some really good literature out there now about the characterization of what we call ambiverts. Okay, AMBEVERT, ambivert, which refers to just exactly what Sharona gave a beautiful example of in terms of these are folks who flip switches. Okay, so under some circumstances, you're going to behave in a certain way. In other circumstances, you may behave in a different way. And the term ambivert is a fairly recently concocted term, but it beautifully describes what you just said. So that's what you are. You're an ambivert. And,
I'm going to add that to my profile, to my
there you go.
social media
there
profile. I just updated my social media profile, by the way, to include some descriptors that I think are particularly appropriate to today's show. I added that I was an opinion haver and a non-stick to sportser. So we do not stick to sports here at Back Talk.
No,
never have, never will. Yeah.
This is what I love, because the discussion can evolve. You can start from one point and evolve to wherever you want to end up. And the good thing is that somehow along the way we get out what we want to say. Yeah. And it may not be in a left brain kind of way. But that's just how we work. I'm right there with you, because I'm very right-brained, and your conversations make total sense to me. So let me just go on the record saying.
I think that's why we connected so immediately and so completely. It's because that we do, a lot of times we do think alike. Now, we don't always agree, and that's good too. Yes. I enjoy people who, don't always agree with me and who are willing to have those discussions with me that explore the reasons why we disagree. And it's interesting. We're going to maybe bleed over a little bit into our media segment, but it's fascinating to me to see who will have those conversations with you and how people respond to a woman who will disagree with you and want to have those discussions. And I'm going to tell a story later on, but I don't want to get into that. I want to stick with Doug Whaley and the Bills right now. So how would you, I hate to put you on the spot like this. I know that we both do like Doug Whaley on a personal level. How would you, I don't want to say grade, because grades are, how would you assess, maybe is a better way to ask it. How would you assess Doug Whaley's tenure as the Buffalo Bills general manager?
Mixed.
Okay.
I think one of the things that troubles me too, and I talk a lot about this, is binary thinking, and we tend to get into that where something is either all good or all bad.
Yep.
And I think truly there are mixed reasons for almost any situation that you want to talk about. But
absolutely,
Doug Whaley made some good decisions, did some good things, in my opinion. But he also made, in my opinion, he made some boneheaded moves, given 2 number 1 picks for, Sammy Watkins, plus a 4th rounder, I think it was.
That was
in a draft,
steep price to pay. Yeah.
Yeah, it really was. Now, somebody on Twitter, and I wish I could remember who it was, made a comment that, we got that pick back. Thank you, Coach McDermott, because we traded down in the first round. Listen to me, but I'm a Bills homer, so it's no secret.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, I've never claimed to be objective about them whatsoever. They traded down and they got their number 1 pick back. So I'm down with some of the stuff that Whaley did. Some of it was a head scratcher for sure. His drafting, there are 2 players left, and there's no players left, I think, from the 2013 draft. But there's only a couple of players left in the last several drafts. So, that part of it has to be questionable. And for that, you have to look at your scouting department. I mean, that makes total sense to me that it was time to turn over the scouting department. And some people, and I just want to add this thought, some people that I'm seeing that, I follow on Twitter are concerned about Sean McDermott being given too much power.
I'm very concerned about it.
Yeah. A lot of people are concerned about it. I think that's a very reasonable concern. Let me preface that. It's a very reasonable concern. However, sometimes you got to go by the seat of your pants, and if you really feel like you struck gold in terms of the right person to right the ship, thing that can happen. We've been out of the playoffs for 17 years. So if we go through another coaching cycle again, what big deal is that, right?
I'm sorry, Robyn. I just have to laugh at that. Yeah.
Oh, you have to. But, it is the bottom line. I tell people, it's what's so awful about failing again when you're on your 9th head coach since 2009?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are there any names in the mix for GM that you particularly like or don't like?
Well, the big talk is, of course, that McDermott wants to bring in, I can't think of his name, the assistant general manager for the Panthers. And
Bean, I think his name is.
Yeah, that's right. And
Kevin Bean, is that his name?
Yep. He's going to be interviewing definitely for the job. The other guy, again, is the former general manager of Washington, Scott McLaughlin. I would be really.
I think he got such a raw deal. I think he got such a raw deal in Washington, and really, my heart just breaks for the man. I'm sure that he's made mistakes. We all make mistakes. We're human, but he just really. That whole situation was awful.
It was awful, and I will say this. I think, and I'm just going to say it because of my own professional background, but I'm appalled, to be honest with you, that he would be fired because of a disease, and we're only surmising.
Well, that's very much against the law, by the way.
Well, yeah. And the bottom line
throw
is
that out there.
Right. I mean, nobody may be able to make that direct connection, but to me, the bottom line is, wow, if he had a heart disease or some other kind of, illness, is that how we would treat somebody? Oh, I can't even go there. So
we seem to be living in an age where we don't consider that, and I think back and I hate to give Clay Travis any sort of publicity because my opinion of him could not sink any lower. The whole the Tack McKinley thing and what he had to say about, Tack McKinley is just a prime example. I mean, what kind of morally lacking person does what he did? We've seen the death of decency and empathy and, any sort. I keep wanting to bleed into our media segment, but I just really am. I mean, am I sounding like get off my lawn? I don't know.
No.
I'm so concerned about.
It's a lack of compassion. We've evolved into a way where there is a real scarcity of compassion going around these days.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so easy to judge and to make fun of and, to point fingers at. And I find that, emotionally sad for myself. I'll be 62 years old this year, so I'm an old fart and been around for a while. And I'll tell you what, it's been a while since I've seen this level. This
60 is the new 30. You're not old.
Yes. Please no. Happy to be 60 plus and rah rah. But anyway, bottom line is, I think there is a genuine lack of compassion that's kind of pervasive.
I think there's also a genuine lack of appreciation for, I don't want to say elder statesmen, and we really are bleeding into our media segment and what we're going to talk about in there. Real quick, let's talk about the Bills draft, and then we'll talk about the AFC East just real quick because I do want to get to our media segment. I feel like you and I have some good thoughts on it. Hopefully okay. I can put together a good thought. I know Robyn has good thoughts and will articulate them well. Me probably not as much. I liked what the Bills did. I know a lot of people weren't especially happy. Sorry, I hope I don't lose my voice. I know a lot of people weren't especially happy with the Deion Dawkins pick, which was really, I think, one of my favorite selections. How do you feel about their draft?
Love it. And here's the thing, and if you all are interested in this, I wrote an article for Bills Wire the other day on how Sean McDermott really, and it was his draft, as we now know, how he really stuck to his principles. Every single one of these draft picks was a 4-year player. Every one of them played in more than 40 games. Every one of them is, when you look at their academic, background, et cetera, the only player that had any kind of a character blemish was Deion Dawkins, and that was getting involved in a brawl at a bar, and the charges were dropped. And even at that, Coach McDermott said, you know what, we investigated that thoroughly. So this guy is detailed in terms of, McDermott, he did something that the Bills haven't done in years, and that is they actually affected the draft rather than being a recipient of whatever happened to them. They were aggressive. They were strategic. They were tactical. Moving up and down, some people were pissed, excuse my French, some people were angry that they gave up some draft picks to maneuver around the boards. But McDermott seems to know exactly who he wants, and he's willing to pay a certain price to get there. I'm fine with it. This is this draft we'll know in a few years, but I think it was a good draft.
I think it was a good draft too. I really liked it. The Nate Peterman selection was fascinating to me. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to take a spin around the AFC East, talk about their draft selections, and then we'll move on to our media segment. So stay tuned in. You are listening to Bat Talk with Sharona. All right, welcome back. Thanks for listening to Bat Talk with Sharona. I'm your host. My name is Sharona. I'm talking with Robyn Mundy of the Bills Wire, Buffalo Bills fan base. I'll let her tell you all the numerous places she can find you and where you can find her on social media. Always such a pleasure to talk to Robyn, and it's fun being back. It's fun being back.
Hello, boys! I'm back!
Yeah, I had to get that one in there. So I thought the division had a great draft, Robyn. Jump on in here with your thoughts on that, and also tell everybody where they can find you and find your work. And before we get out of here, we'll let you tell them again.
Okay, well, first of all, you can find me on Twitter at Robyn, R-O-B-Y-N, Mundy, M-U-N-D-Y, Y-O, W-Y-O at the end, Robyn Mundy, Y-O. That's where you can find me on Twitter. Bills Wire, I have articles. I'm a contributing author there, and that is at BillsWire, BILLSWIRE .usatoday.com. And I am also the editor-in-chief of the most wonderful Bills Mafia. And you can find me at buffalofambase.org. That's BUFFALOFAM.
Yeah, I knew I'd mess that up.
BASE.org. So check it out and let's roll. As far as this draft in the AFC East, this is a smart division in terms of drafting.
The Miami Dolphins had a great draft. They didn't have a ton of draft picks. They did very, very well. I'm very excited about their draft. Excuse me, their draft selection.
Yeah, in New England always, they're cunning. They always have a lot of picks. They always move around the board. They always end up, getting what they want or, getting more draft picks. That's just how Bill Belichick operates. And
it's so funny and it's weird because I write for Inside the Pylon as well, and we have a Slack channel, many sub-channels in Slack, and I'm not shy about voicing my opinion, and so we'll be talking about something, and the most recent example that comes to mind is, do you draft a quarterback every year? How often do you take a developmental quarterback? And so, I'll share my opinion, and inevitably someone will come in and say, who else does it that way? And it's the Patriots and Bill Belichick. And I talk a lot about on this podcast about the respect that I have for Bill Belichick, and so it's like, no, I did not know that, but okay, there's certainly worse people to be compared to, so, but yeah, the Patriots only had 3 draft selections. The Patriots are an example in that sense of how I view what you should do. They are a great example of a team that lets the draft come to them, that lets free agency come to them, that, looks at, like, the Bills making the RFA offer to their running, his name escapes me, the running back that they just lost to the Patriots.
Oh, Mike
Gillislee. I probably would have mispronounced his name anyway. So yeah, it's interesting to watch how they operate and what they do. If you had, and let's talk about the Jets. Let me pull them up here. Jamal Adams, such a great player.
Yeah. The thing that surprised me the very most about the Jets is that they didn't quarterback.
Yeah.
I was dumbfounded by that, but whatever. They must feel they have what they're looking for, where they're at, or they're going to, just kind of cruise for a year.
They had 4 quarterbacks last year, so, I guess they're going to give Christian Hackenberg an opportunity. They've got Bryce Petty, I believe.
Yep.
They've got, what are you going to do? the Jets are an interesting team. I really, really like Todd Bowles. Will they ever be not dysfunctional, a functional team? I don't know. Outside of Jamal Adams, I'm sort of iffy on their draft. We talked about the Dolphins. We talked about the Bills. If you had to rank the draft in the division in terms of top to bottom, how would you rank it?
Well, that's a good question, and I'm shocked to say, because it's not been the case for many, many years, but I think the Bills had the best draft.
I do too.
And, of course I'm a homer and I'm going to say that, but I really do think this time they had the best draft. I think
I would
Miami
go
had
Bills.
a great draft.
I would go Bills, Patriots. Bills, Dolphins, Patriots, Jets.
Yeah, that works. Because I do think the Dolphins had an excellent draft. Adam Gase, I think, is he's going to turn out to be a great coach, I think. And he's evolving this team rapidly to the kind of players he wants. And they're all kind of coming together. And we'll see where it goes. But I think the Dolphins had an excellent draft. Again, my issue with the Jets has more to do with, I guess I was just surprised that they didn't draft a quarterback. Because they're gambling a lot on whoever they're going to be starting. And, if they're not that concerned about making a playoff push this year, then maybe that's fine. But otherwise, I'm highly suspicious. And like you, I really like Todd Bowles. And it very well could be that they have their eye on somebody from the 2018 draft. Who knows? That was a mystery to me. So that's the only reason I would put them last in the division.
Yeah, it was fascinating watching the discussion surrounding this year's crop of quarterbacks, and of course the Bears giving so much to move up and get their guy in. Mitchell Trubisky. Be sure to call him Mitchell.
Right.
We'll see how that turns out. If you don't have a quarterback, you're an interesting and sort of dire straits. I'm Team Tyrod. I'm curious to see what happens with his situation in Buffalo. How do you think Sean McDermott views Tyrod Taylor?
I think he's open-minded. I think this is a perfect situation. I'm delighted that it turned out the way that it did, because Tyrod has many, many wonderful aspects that make him exceptional at his job. There are some things he needs to clean up, his short and intermediate game, that kind of stuff.
But you're going to have that with the young guy. People forget, and I know that he's been in the league for a while, but he hasn't been a starter for that long. That's right. Yeah, and I think he's going to be fine. But this is kind of what they're doing with Sammy Watkins, too, if you think about it. They're saying, okay, you guys, we're going to support you. You go out in the field and you show us this year why we should keep you long term. Yeah.
And I'm down with that, okay? And some people know, this bleeds into Sammy Watkins, but it's true. His fifth-year option was not picked up, and I'm reading all these people whining all over the media about it, like, oh, how stupid is Buffalo for not doing that? Well, maybe they know a lot more than we do about his medical. And for anybody that's
his medicals
interested,
have to be concerning, yeah.
Well, for anybody that's interested, I have pinned to the top of my Twitter page an article I wrote probably 6 months ago about the complications that can happen when you have intramedullary screw fixation. In other words, they put metal in your foot. And some people just don't tolerate having metal in their feet. And wide receivers put a lot of
my
force on
foot's
their
hurting just
feet.
thinking about it. Eek.
Yes. So my point is that, maybe the Bills are being strategic for a change and not willing to overspend like they have so many times in the past for people that they have question marks about. Tyrod does need to produce this year. I mean, he does need to be a more effective short and intermediate passer. He needs to be more effective at that. He needs to be more effective in the middle of the field than he has been in the past. So pay him. This is good. And on top of it all, they draft Nathan Peterman from Pitt, who, if you don't have a chance today, make sure you do at some point. Go on the Buffalo Bills website and look at the Bills today. They have a video of it's trick shots done. It's kind of like the old video that was done by Alex Tanney some years ago. These are trick shots done by Nathan Peterman.
Currently on the Titans. He's on the Titans roster. Yeah.
They still think they can develop him. Now, if I'm not mistaken, Tanney was like Division III or Division II. I don't think he was a Division I quarterback, but Peterman is. And, wow, all I can say is I really like his accuracy.
I told my Nate Peterman story on our Inside the Pylon Fantasy Football wrap-up show. I won't repeat it here. You can check that out. Was on the Tennessee Volunteers roster for a while, and made what for him was the right decision to transfer and move on. And I want everyone to be successful, mostly everyone to be successful. It's very rare that I run across an animal that I already mentioned the name that because of the what they do, you're not thrilled about successfulness. But for most of these young guys, they're easy to pull for and root for, and but it's competition's everywhere. Great way to segue into our media segment. It's a competitive world. The job market for a lot of industries, not just media, but a lot of other industries too, is undergoing rapid change. It reminds me of Jurassic Park, rapid and chaotic and unpredictable. Life will find a way to adapt to new technology, new thinking, and what have you. But if one person succeeds, a lot of times that means someone else is going to lose their job, have to move on somewhere else, and it's kind of the nature of the beast.
Well, it certainly is, and I'll bleed right into this too. I think that we're at a crossroads. This firing of all these people from ESPN, it really underscores an industry that is in creative destruction. And by that, I mean it's evolving rapidly. And you brought it up, Sharona. It has to do with technology, in part. You and I can now have a conversation that a whole lot of people can listen to. These are all things that we never even thought about, 20, 30 years ago. So we're rapidly putting out a lot of product, and we're in the same way, and I can understand this, wreaking havoc with the profession of journalism.
Yep.
Because I do see journalists under siege these days, and it breaks my heart because it's a noble profession. And what happens sometimes is I think the average public forgets that there's a tremendous difference between bloggers and professional journalists. In all
sometimes
honesty.
and in some ways. Yeah, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to wrap up with our media segment. So stay tuned. You're listening to Bat Talk with Sharona. All right, we're back. Thanks for listening to Bat Talk with Sharona. I am your host. My name is Sharona. You can follow me out there in the Twitter sphere, Sports by Sharona. I'm talking with Robyn Mundy of Bills Wire, the Buffalo, the Bills Mafia. She wears many hats. I'm happy to have her as a friend and as someone who's willing to donate her time to come on this podcast. You were talking about this before we took a quick break, Robyn. It is very interesting times in the media, and it's not just sports media, but media in general. A lot of what I see is very concerning to me. We've talked on this podcast a lot, particularly when it came to the election and some of the shenanigans that went down with the election. I fear that we are continuing to live in a downward spiral of dumbing down, the dumbing down of discourse, the dumbing down of media, the dumbing down of a lot of things. And you can feel free to disagree with me, Robyn, by the way, but that just concerns me.
No, I totally agree with you. No, I am on that train, my friend. We absolutely have dummied down. And in that vein, it kind of goes along with what I was alluding to before the break. And I want to make some distinctions between, because I am one, bloggers and professional journalists. And we see this with other professions. It's not just the profession of journalism. It's, the nursing profession. It's, every profession, everywhere you go now, you look and you see that they are under siege in one form or another, and for one reason or another. And the bottom line is, because we've evolved into a dummied down culture. Mm-hmm. We want things fast now. Give me 200 words instead of 1,000-word article on a subject, because people don't want to read 1,000 words. Mm-hmm. Okay, this is kind of where we've gone, and mm-hmm. I see the benefit of it. I participate in it. One thing I absolutely love are these podcasts, because it gives you a chance mm-hmm. to really get into the nitty-gritty of your own point mm-hmm. of view.
Sometimes the written word that isn't able to convey tone and sarcasm, right. self-deprecation, a lot of emotions that you're channeling when you write or say something or tweet something, say something in Slack or whatever, and self-deprecation. And I think that is sort of lost in the written word, but podcasting does give you freedom that you wouldn't otherwise have, and so I do once again want to thank you for nudging me again back into the podcasting sphere, so to speak, and for doing this. It's one of the more fascinating things to me is, and you mentioned, I can't remember if we were on the air or off at that point, but we were talking about Ed Werder in particular, and he has like 2 years left on his contract with ESPN, and he was still, let go, told he was being let go, but they're going to honor his contract. That's odd to me. I mean, I can see both good and bad with that.
You know what it says to me, Sharona, is that perhaps, and this certainly isn't finger pointing in any direction, I'm just speaking from what could be their point of view, and by they I mean ESPN and Disney, who owns them. Uh-huh. They, for whatever reason, have picked up on and understand they need to downsize, number one, but also they need to wipe their slate clean. They're in crisis mode. That's what this says to me. They're in crisis mode
absolutely.
At ESPN, because they're losing business, and I see comments about this all over my Twitter feed. People are sick to death about talking about politics on ESPN. It turned a lot of people off. And so now you're going to have You've got the NFL network, you've got the NHL network, and ESPN is losing some of its shine. And where it's going next, I think this is just my opinion, but I think their strategic plan is, we just have to do this now. We can't wait another 2 years, until people's contracts expire. We need to change this lineup now. That's what it says to me.
Yeah, I see that a lot. I don't think politics had as big of an impact as some people seem to think because, they definitely kept some talent that, First Take is still there, I think the bottom line is that ESPN invested in technology that at a time when it looked good, but if you were paying attention, at the time that they made these latest deals, I was like, well, I'm afraid that they've overextended themselves because, I'm a huge gamer, first of all, and I was watching the trend. The trend now is more towards streaming, and I knew what my own personal habits were, in that I didn't want to pay $200 a month anymore to get this huge cable package, because cable TV is shit. Okay?
It is.
It's complete and utter garbage, and I was having to pay $200 a month to get literally 2 cable networks, to be able to watch sports and, maybe to be able to watch FX or, HBO. Fortunately, I have HBO now. I can stream anything I want from HBO, and I suspect we're going to see more of a move to that. But they just overextended themselves on broadcast rights. And
well, they did, and they paid a pretty penny for college football and that sort of thing. And if you pay attention to this in terms of like the quarterly reports that Disney puts out, they have hinted toward this for a long time in terms of streamlining ESPN and doing things differently. This has been in the works by the parent company for quite a while.
Yeah.
So, and they may not have moved fast enough, and that's surprising for Disney in terms of the creative
they absolutely did not move fast enough, and sometimes it just in corporate America things just sometimes do move slowly. I think too, when you're looking at these long-term contracts, it's, well, we want to honor this agreement, but we think this guy's going to be fine and he'll get another job. And at that point, the contract issue goes away. But will he get another job? And that's, the second part of this. There are a large number of talents out there now who are looking for jobs, and what does that do? It makes it even more. It was already competitive. It makes it even more competitive than than the super duper competitiveness that it was before. I promised to tell this story. I want to tell it. I said that as an introvert at times, and really very much so right now, I sit and I'll watch, just lurk on social media and watch, the whole competitive nature and how the layoffs went down, and it really has me thinking about being a woman in the media and what that means. And I want to tell this story. Robyn may have a story to tell too, real quick. We only have about 5 minutes left. I was watching a Twitter conversation between 2 men in the business, and it was heated. Is the best word to come up with on the spur of the moment. It was a very heated discussion that ultimately evolved into personal insults. And I'm watching that and I'm thinking, how different it is to be a woman with an opinion who isn't shy about sharing it, and when you ask a simple question or pose a thought that challenges a man's opinion on social media, the response that you get, two men can literally meet in Temecula on Twitter and go at each other and walk away and everything's fine. But just be a woman and challenge a man's opinion and see what you get. It's a very interesting difference. And I'm sorry.
No, I was just chuckling because that is so true. And I go way back into when I was in high school in terms of being a sports fan and a football fan, a Bills fan. And I fought at the dinner table every Sunday when our family would get together and have dinner, Sunday dinner. All the male cousins and people would talk football, and I would try to enter the conversation, and I got told in no uncertain terms, go back to the kitchen where you belong. And that's how things rolled in those days. And yet, if somebody were to say to me, oh gee, in another 50 years from now or 40 years from now, this is how things are going to be for women in sports. Whew. We've come some ways, but boy, in some ways we haven't come very far at all.
So true. Yeah, it's definitely so true.
Oh, yeah. It's it can be downright hard to be a woman on social media with an opinion. And anybody that knows me or follows me on Twitter knows that I'm not afraid to share my opinion. And that's just how I roll. That's how I roll. And my view is, and I think that's what we all have to get to as women on social media who are involved in interested in sports, to just keep going.
Yep.
Just keep going. Don't let your feelings get hurt, because that's just the way the world is right now.
You have to have thick skin. There's no question whatsoever, but that you have to have thick skin. But you know what? You also just have to keep telling yourself that you cannot play small. You cannot play small. The world may not want to hear that women are important and strong and have opinions, and hey, they may want to voice them, and you might not always like the way in which they voice them, but it's important to listen to them. Maybe that's not popular, but it's important. Robyn, it's such a pleasure. We're running out of time. Once again, tell everybody out there where they can find you and find your work.
Thank you. You can find me on Twitter at Robyn, ROBYNMUNDY, capital letters WYO. At Billswire, you can find me at billswire.usatoday.com, and on Bill's Mafia blog, Buffalo, fambase.org. That's BUFFALOFAMBASE.org. And that's where I'm at.
All right. It was great chatting with you. You can find me on Twitter, Sports by Sharona. Follow the website, Back Talk with Sharona. Check me out tonight on Going for Two with Zach Law, 8 p.m. Thanks for listening. Have a great Wednesday. Happy Hump Day. We'll be back next week, so stay tuned in. You've been listening to Back Talk with Sharona.